hold. With that, Ms. Casillas, affirming the motion that this House believes that faithful Catholics must vote for Trump in the upcoming election, you have the floor.
Wow, I'm honestly just so thankful to be in front of you guys here today, and honestly kind of nervous, but it honestly feels like just last night I was so fired up and inspired by Napoleon Dynamite that I got up on that stage wearing my MAGA gear, dancing for you, and hope to inspire you to vote for Trump this November 3rd. If any of you guys don't get that reference, should have come to the talent show last night. But anyway, I digress. Let's take a quick look at this motion. This House believes that faithful Catholics must vote for Trump this upcoming election. Now, I know what some of you guys are already thinking. It's the must that gets me. I have beef with the must. So let's define it real quick. Must is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a word that is used to signify that something is either necessary or, emphasis on the or, very important. So since ordinary English is not modern symbolic logic, we'll be using the exclusive use of the or, meaning that we will be focusing on the latter half of the definition, essentially the very important part. So Mr. McKenna and I this evening will be convincing you of why it is very important for each and every one of you guys that are sitting here to vote for President Trump this upcoming election. So the first thing I want to address is third-party voters. So first of all, I just want to affirm you guys. You guys are expressing the right to vote, you're being active citizens, and you are voting in the direction that you wish the country to go for. However, the support that you are providing for your third party should have been done at the beginning of the political season, because if it was truly that important, you would have helped lobby for them so that they get enough signatures to be on every single state ballot, have enough fundraising so that they have an effective campaign, and also so that they either get on one of the major party ballots. So we have, as educated citizens, we have to realistically acknowledge the way that the 2020 election is going to work, and it is a two-party system. And I'm not going to get into whether that's a good or bad system, because that's an entirely different debate on, by itself. But we must realistically acknowledge that two-party system. So that means it's going to come down to three cases. Case one, the Republican Party wins the presidency. Case two, the Democratic Party wins the presidency, or case three, there is a tie. It's 2020, y'all, I just had to throw it in there. So in the weird case that there is a tie, the vote would be going to the House of Representatives, and essentially whoever has the party majority would end up allowing their party candidate to be elected. So for those of you who are not aware, the Democratic Party currently holds the party majority in the House of Representatives. So two of these three cases guarantee a win for Joe Biden. So just think about that. And I believe that the third-party vote is important because it does make up 3 to 5% of the vote. However, you must think about who you are helping and who you are harming by casting your vote in a certain way. And also, I just wanted to make a quick side note of addressing the popular vote now, because I know there's some people that think that the popular vote is not important and that it all comes down to the Electoral College, which is false, because there are 29 states that have laws that require their electors to vote based on what the popular vote ends up deciding. So that is why your popular vote is also important. Moving on. In 2015, the USCCB published a pamphlet entitled Forming Consciences and Faithful Citizenship. In this pamphlet, they address the fact that abortion is the preeminent moral issue that our nation is facing right now. And obviously, we're not single-issue voters, and we shouldn't be. We should be able to have a whole understanding of all the different life issues. However, it also states in that work that, for example, the right to healthcare, the right to work, to family, and culture, that all of these are simply illusory if we do not have the right to life. So think about it. Why is this the case? Well, if you're not alive, then you can't have those rights. So just think about that. And for that reason, I am asking you guys to vote very carefully and very wisely, because essentially, our unborn brothers and sisters in Christ do not have a voice, so you are standing in for their voice right now, and they are the future of this country. So we must do what we can to stand together and unite and go strive for the common good, realistically understanding the situation we are right now. So for that reason, I'll leave that decision up to you, and remember the consequences that could happen and the step backwards we would be taking if we allow Joe Biden to get into office, because he would be expanding the evil of abortion by removing different legal stuff that is already in place. So with that, I leave you just a reminder to vote for Trump this November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Casillas. We will have a question after all four presenters have spoken, but now I'm going to invite Mr. Garrett Wolf to the floor to oppose the current motion.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. All right, so can you all hear me without this? I kind of prefer that. No? All right, I'm getting hisses. Okay, here we go. All right, so my opposition would have you believe that, first off, abortion can be changed through the executive branch. It cannot. Abortion is something that can only be changed through Supreme Court. And as we have seen, Trump has already elected a Supreme Court nominee. I don't believe any of the other ones are going to kick the bucket anytime soon, just saying. But on that note, I want to enumerate why Catholics don't must vote for Donald Trump in this coming election. They may, they can, but they don't have to. It's not an imperative. Firstly, a Catholic must align themselves with their moral conscience. Within forming citizenship or forming consciousness for faithful citizenship, there's actually a line that discusses how a Catholic voter may vote for the opposing side or a side that has policies that they themselves do not support if they do not will what is on that ballot, right? So essentially, a Republican Catholic may vote for Donald Trump in the intent of supporting his pro-life motives. However, they cannot vote for him, they can still vote for him even without supporting his policies on immigration, the environment, or a myriad of other factors that don't coincide with the Catholic Church's teaching. And secondly, it works on the opposing side. I'm not trying to convince you to vote for Biden, but a Catholic may morally vote for Biden so long as their intent is not to support abortion. If they abortion is a big factor. I agree with that. However, if a Catholic themselves, it's up to their moral conscience to decide what is biggest to them, what impacts them most, what they see the most as a specific feature. Okay. Getting a little spicy. There are other grave things that are going on that many people don't tend to pay attention to, so it seems. There are things going along the border, such as detention, children being forcibly separated from their parents, and even Donald Trump, he's kind of pro-death penalty. What is the difference between the value inside the womb and the value outside the room? Is it not important to treat people both inside and outside with the human dignity that they deserve? We seem to narrow in as Catholics only focusing on abortion, but then we remain silent when it comes to everything else that is affecting our society. We can't remain quiet. So, not only must we pay attention to our conscience and our intentship, but what are we to do as Catholic voters? If a Catholic Democrat votes for Biden, they must act out and speak out against the things within their party that they see wrong. Similarly, as a Republican must speak out what they see wrong within their party. We cannot remain silent. But in doing so, there's no perfect candidate. Trump wasn't sent by God, neither was Joe Biden. And there's ways to do that don't include just voting for Donald Trump. By being a member of the Democratic Party, as a Catholic, you have a chance to persuade those who need the persuading the most. And additionally, my opponent would like you to believe that third-party votes don't count, that they don't matter. At the state level, you only need 5% of the popular vote to be listed on that state's ballots. And at the national level, again, 5%. Okay? And maybe the third-party candidate you want is not on the ballot this year, but you can impart that change by voting for them now, and maybe they'll be on the ballot the next time. Get their name going. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Now I'm going to invite Mr. McKenna to the floor for the second affirming speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. If you haven't heard those words before, perhaps you should read the Bible a little more as a Catholic. But we are at Franciscan, so I expect you all have read Matthew 20:21, which is what I just read. And hopefully I cited that correctly, as I am not in any of the PBS classes. But nonetheless, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. First of all, I think what that means is that tonight, in a very fiery debate, which has a packed house, as you all can see, we are called to be charitable. I think it's going to be rather difficult. Mr. Orsay and myself are best friends and nearly died in Austria this semester. And we like to go at each other's throats. But we are going to refrain for the sake of this debate, and I would invite you all to do the same, just as a caveat to begin, in order to make sure that we keep this as a respectful dialogue. Amen? Amen. All right, I will have 3 points. First of all, we will look at what the word must means. Second of all, we will look at the theological reasons why we must vote for Trump. And finally, we'll look at the political reasons why we must vote for Trump. First of all, must. I think we can all agree that must does not mean the ex cathedra must. It is not like we must believe the Immaculate Conception. We must, of course, believe that. And this is not at that level of must, nor is it at the smaller level of must that the church says we must light the candles before Mass. For any of you who have been to Mass at Franciscan, we get them right 95% of the time, and the other 5%, we light them during the Gospel. But must is referring to the obligation that we have as Catholics to form an upright moral conscience that will support God's law, obedience to His truth. And this leads me directly into my second point, the theological reasons why we must vote for Trump. I will have a 5-step approach to this, which will tie directly into Mr. Wolf, because I would absolutely agree with him. We must follow our conscience. First of all, we must follow our conscience. We have a conscience. God has given it to us for a reason. Second of all, we must form that conscience. Anyone who does not form their conscience is, in fact, violating God's law. And especially as faithful Catholics, which you'll notice, we're not talking about lackadaisical, lukewarm Catholics in this resolution. We are talking about faithful Catholics. We are called particularly so to exercise that ability to learn the truth about the Catholic faith and to live it. This means that at the end of the day, my third point under here, we only have the freedom for what is good. John Paul II makes this very clear. The American idea, so-called, of freedom of religion where you can be anything you want to be, even a Satanist, freedom to take a baby's life, these are not really freedoms. The only freedom comes from God, and that freedom is found in His truth and in His law. My fourth point, President Donald Trump has said on multiple occasions and has exemplified through his actions, even on his first day of office, that he is pro-life. Now, this does fly in the face of some of his other actions, which might not be considered pro-life. I am not here to canonize the man. I'm not even here to put him on a pedestal, but only to ask that you vote for him as president. And why is that emphasis on pro-life so important? For the simple reason that the church has made very clear in many documents, the Evangelium Vitae, many others, that the right to life, pro-life, is the first responsibility, the first thing that we as Catholics must promote in life. For no other right, no other ability, no other goodness from immigration policy, from welfare policy, from other social issues can be had unless we first have life. It is life that determines and defines who we are as Catholics, and it always has been, and it always will be. Let me remind you once again of the scriptures where Christ calls us to lay down our lives for our friends. It is very clear that life is the central issue, the central idea that we must be talking about here. And so, following my line of reasoning, we as Catholics must vote for President Donald Trump.
1 minute.
Oh, I've got another point to go to. We must vote for Donald Trump as Catholics because of his policies on life. And because if we have formed moral consciences, there is no other decision that we can make at the ballot box. Now, I have another point that I'm going to have to truncate a bit because, as per usual, I've run out of time. Politically, we've talked a little bit about third parties with Mr. Wolf's speech. Basically, the American system does not support third parties. When was the last time someone heard of a third party winning seats in the House of Representatives? When was the last time we heard of a third party taking the presidency?
15 seconds.
15 seconds, good grief. That's not to say that third parties don't matter. In fact, I think the American Solidarity Party, though I've not read any of their views, has a lot of good positions to hold. But is that a reason that we use our vote for them?
Please conclude.
In November? No. We must instead support them in other ways in order to make them one of the two major parties, not split it into three ways. Thank you very much.
And as our final prepared speech of this section, we are going to invite Mr. Luke Orsay, opposing the motion.
Thank you. And he asked the crowd, "Shall I crucify your king?" And they responded, "We have no king but Caesar." Now, it's a shame that I decided to go after Mr. McKenna, given that he's given such a poor mirror to my own argument. Now it seems like I'm ripping him off, but c'est la vie, as it is. So I'm here today to talk about the semantics of this statement. This House believes that the faithful Catholics must vote for Trump in the upcoming election. Every one of you can pull out your phones right now and look up the word must and see that the first thing on there is obliged to or obligated to. I don't know, I can't remember things. It says one of those things. You can look at it right now. That is not a conditional statement. That is not a should. That is a need. That is a must. Must, 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 must. Remember that word for the rest of the evening. Must. Now, must is an unconditional verb, meaning it includes not only everybody in this room, but everybody in the blanket group, i.e., faithful Catholics. Just for the thought experiment, can everybody please put their heads down, just very quickly? I'm not messing with you, I promise. Just put your heads down, close your eyes. If any of you believe Donald Trump to be evil, could you just quickly make eye contact with me in some way, shape, or form? Okay, excellent. Put your heads down. Pick them back up. All right, cool. So it's not on me to determine whether those are faithful Catholics or not. They might not be. Where I'm going with this is those are the people that you must convince, not necessarily me or Mr. Wolf or anybody else, but them. The only thing that Catholics must do in an election is vote with their conscience and in accordance with natural law, i.e., they cannot vote for evil. What that means is that you must convince those people to vote for a candidate that they believe to be evil. Whether that is justified or not is neither here nor there. There are many good reasons why somebody might not want to vote for Trump or would believe that he is evil. If you don't believe me, sit down and have coffee with some of them sometime. I'm not going to get into that. It's not important. So I assume that where we go from there is these people believe Trump is evil, and the House, the Veritas Society, says they must still vote for President Trump, though they believe him to be evil. Must. Must. Crazy, right? So they believe him to be evil, but they must vote for him. Why? They believe a candidate to be evil, and they must vote for him. If he's evil, you do not support him, period. If you believe a source to be evil, you do not vote for it. If you believe a faction to be evil, you do not vote for it. You do not support it. It's that simple. And now I have no doubt that the only place we can go with that is the lesser of two evils argument. I mean, God knows we all heard that a lot in the 2016 election. I mean, almost every time I would hear, like, I'd ask somebody, so why are you voting for Trump? Their answer would be, well, Hillary. In case you didn't notice, Joe Biden is nowhere on that sign. I don't even know who Joe Biden is for the sake of this debate. It says President Trump, faithful Catholics, and must. Those are the important words that, Mr. McKenna, I'm disappointed in you for not biting the bullet and directly addressing those words.
Third person only, please.
Thank you. So then, you would have to convince them you need to vote for the lesser of two evils. So then posit to you, lesser of two evils, since they believe both Trump to be evil, but Biden is a greater evil. Okay, would you then, and I'm going to get hissed at for this, would you then vote for Hitler over Stalin because Hitler killed fewer people than Stalin? No, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's on the same wavelength. Two evils, just on a much more extreme end of the spectrum. Those of you hissing, take a moment. Ask yourself about this. Ask yourself where you draw the line. If you believe in that lesser of two evils argument, where do you draw the line? Would you vote for Hitler over Stalin? Or better, would you vote for Joe Biden over Hitler? No, don't hiss at me. Ask yourself. Ask yourself this hard question and answer it honestly. And if you come out with the conclusion that you should vote for the lesser of two evils, i.e. endorsing evil, you are not a faithful Catholic. You are not a faithful Catholic. And the blanket statement must covers all faithful Catholics. And you are telling ones who believe that Donald Trump is evil that they must vote for President Trump, even though they believe him to be evil. Justify that to me. Justify voting against the Catholic conscience. Do it. Thank you so much for that phrase, must, in this. What I'm trying to say is, where I'm trying to go with this, what I'm trying to support in terms of candidate, it doesn't matter. America will come and go. The Constitution will come and go. Jesus Christ is King now and forever. You will not crucify your king by forcing your brethren to vote for something that they believe is evil. And the only way that you can affirm this motion, every single one of you, the only way you can affirm this motion tonight is if you believe they must vote for that lesser of two evils. You believe that you must vote for Hitler over Stalin. You believe you must vote for Biden over Hitler. You believe that, you that hiss. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you very much.
I really want a pro-Hitler versus Stalin speech later tonight. As of right now, we are going to now go into questions, beginning with Ms. Casillas. So if you have a question for Ms. Casillas, you may stand up. I will choose the person who is asking. You have 1 minute to ask the question. She will have 1 minute to respond. So anybody who currently has a question for Ms. Eileen Casillas, you may stand up now. I see. All right, then we will move on.
Please wait.
Oh, wait. Oh, okay.
So my niece was just visiting, and we just had this argument yesterday morning for like 3 hours, but I would love to hear from all you educated people. She's an ex-Catholic now, unfortunately, and part of that was due to what she perceived to be hypocrisy among the pro-life movement of caring for unborn babies, but not caring about
Please,
the
in
poor
the form of a question.
and all the other issues. So my question would be for the must vote for Trump people, how can we support a one-issue vote? How does the unborn trump everything else, the poor, the immigrants, all those other things that are also Catholic pro-life issues?
Great, wonderful. I am so glad you asked. So I think that the reason that there is a high emphasis being placed on the right to life is because that right to life is necessary for all other rights to come in afterwards. However, in my later speech, I am actually going to address the issue of immigration when I actually have the time to do that, because I think I only have about a minute to answer your question, but just hold on for that, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We now are going to have Mr. Garrett Wolf. If anybody has a question for Mr. Wolf, you may now stand up or raise your hand, and we can hear from you. The gentleman all the way in the back.
Coming to you, Matthew.
I just like making my co-chairs run everywhere.
You're here.
I will admit it.
All right, so that's a little loud. So how should Is there any way to make this less loud?
You just hold about yours, good.
Oh, okay. I don't do this a lot. I typically just shout at people and they respond. If not, no luck. So how should Catholics enter the Democratic Party in order to create a two-party system that actually represents pro-life voters? Because I agree with you on everything about Donald Trump being kind of a jerk, but I also, don't want to support the guy that just said he wants to codify Roe v. Wade into law. So how are Catholics going to do that over the long term?
I'm sorry, can you reiterate that real quick for me? Do what over the long term?
Actually make the Democratic Party pro-life on the issue of abortion.
So that stems from defeating the beast from within itself, right? So in order to do that, you have to become a vocal voice within a party to change it. At one point, the Democratic Party was pro-life and is no longer. Okay, so the way that you do that is by getting representatives in there and voting for those representatives who have democratic values but are also pro-life. Similarly, how we vote for different senators, like most people work up the political ladder, starting as a senator or a congressman or something like that, and keep going up. So vote for those people as a Democrat in order to change the party as a whole.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. We now will have a question for Mr. McKenna. So you may stand now. Yes, you, sir, in the back over there. Yeah, can we get him a microphone?
Oh, you're good. Thank you.
Please make it quick, Mr. Walker.
Anything for you, Alex. So my question is, I just caught the tail end of your speech, and you were speaking about pro-life and President Trump, and he's been in office for about 4 years now, and I was marching at the March for Life before he came along, and I'm still doing it now. So what will another 4 years of him do for the pro-life cause?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Short answer is I don't know. I can tell you that on his first day of office, he put back into effect, I think what's called the Hyde Amendment, I could be wrong about that, where you no longer can fund international abortions with American taxpayer dollars. And of course, we've seen 3 justices put on the Supreme Court, which to more or less degree have a pretty pro-life stance. So what the next 4 years will bring, not exactly sure. But I think if we continue to exert pressure through as many avenues as possible in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, but especially in the local level and the grassroots level, then we can see an effective overturning of Roe v. Wade. Perhaps not in the next 4 years, that's probably really optimistic, but certainly, hopefully within our lifetime.
And finally, a question for Mr. Orsay. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Cirilla?
So, if you do not vote for the, quote, lesser of two evils, what do you do?
You refrain from voting because there's this weird idea that when you don't vote... Stop hissing. I'm trying to talk. Why are you booing me? I'm right. So...
Order. Order.
You're not voting for the lesser of two evils. Instead, when you do not cast a vote, you're acquiescing with not acquiescing with two evils. You're not obligated because one side is driving off a cliff and the other side is driving off a cliff but with fire at the bottom to drive off of just the cliff without the fire at the bottom. Not voting is a form of voting because you're not acquiescing with the system. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orsay. All right, we are now going to begin our open floor speeches. You will have 5 minutes to speak and 1 question after that. So if anybody has any speeches that they prepared or have thought up on the fly, they're more than welcome. Yes, ma'am. Miss Your last name?
You want my first name or last name? What are you asking me? Hi, my name is Helen. I'm from Michigan. It's a swing state. I'm a centrist. So honestly, we're kind of pariahs in the political world because we don't take sides. Oh no, that's awful in America. No, it's not. And I'll tell you why. Centrism is informed by the left and the right. I agree with the left on some things, and I agree with the right on some things. I have a well-informed conscience. What I'm here to tell you today is the reason we must not vote for Trump is because of the way he acts. Yeah, I know. Recently, Pope Francis came out with an encyclical called Fratelli Tutti. Hear me out. I encourage all of you to read it. It's on fraternal love. It's about how we're supposed to treat our neighbor. It's beautiful. He calls all of you people who are hissing at me out. And so, what Pope Francis is getting at is that we should be treating our brother with the utmost respect and working to foster a community in our own countries. It doesn't even mean America, like just solely. We need to be, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I wrote notes, but I'm freaking out right now. No act of love will go unturned. It will not be wasted if we don't vote for Trump. And gosh, this is actually really hard. I guess I'm done. I'm sorry.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Yes, Mr. Dewar.
Lydia, could you get So the late Archbishop Fulton Sheen once said that Christian love bears evil but does not tolerate it. And so with that in mind, how could we, what would be your idea of how we can vote in this upcoming election?
I'm sorry, I didn't notice you were asking me a question.
Okay, so Archbishop Fulton Sheen once said that Christian love bears evil but does not tolerate it. And you were talking about love, and how can we, in this upcoming election, bear that in mind, and who should we vote for if we're talking about love and how Trump doesn't?
So, I have actually already voted in this election. I did an absentee vote, and I had to write in Brian Carroll for the American Solidarity Party. Brian Carroll 2020, hey. And so his policies encompass the dignity of human life. It means the environment. It means the pro-life movement, from conception to natural death. It's not, like, his policies aren't perfectly in line. If you want to feel good about your choice and actually feel like you're helping out a third party, voting Brian Carroll is a good idea. Like, I'm totally against the idea that third parties don't count. If you get enough Christians voting for a third party, we'll actually hurt their numbers, which is what they're most concerned about nowadays. And like I said,
15 seconds.
I live in a swing state, so my third party vote is gonna hurt. So I would encourage the third party vote. It doesn't even matter if it's like Brian Carroll or someone else, but don't give in to the lies.
All right, thank you. Just as a reminder, by volunteering in this section of the debate, you are going to answer one question if anybody has any. We will have a lightning round later where you do not have to answer any questions. Yes. Yes, you, sir. Please come. Mr. Kerr.
Say your last name. Last name, proud. So my name is Mr. Kerr. I am up here to speak against specifically Mr. Orsay's argument on the lesser of two evils. So he is absolutely correct. We as Catholics cannot make the choice between two evils. Like, it doesn't, absolutely not. But the question is that the case? Is that the case? Because you did make the argument that the whole reason is for those folks who think that Trump is evil, you'd be asking them to vote for an evil. But the thing is, you can have a malformed conscience. It's a matter of being right or wrong. Trump is a terrible man. Like, I'm just gonna state that right there. Like, he's just not a good guy. Really not a good guy. But he's not evil. He does bad things and he does good things. He's a human being, right? So the question is not between two evils. I'm not even going to address Joe. I'm not going to address Mr. Biden. Old sleepy. But what we do know is that there is a good, and Trump is a good option, which means that we can vote for him, yes? Which means that we don't have to not vote against him, right? Yes? Yes. Now, going to the issue of the two-party system, just because I hate this issue so very much. I hate it so much. Practically, there are two parties in the United States. That is it. So my ancestors come from Cuba, which is a one-party state. It's better than that, I'll give you that. But there are two parties. Did you know that in communist countries, there are other parties other than the main party? So in the USSR, there were other parties. Did they ever win? They never did. Practically speaking, if we want to do anything within the United States, we need to work within the system, right? And it is a two-party system, one of which is the Republican Party, the other which is the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, for all of its faults and failings, I'm not a Republican, by the way, but I'm also not a Democrat. But I am voting Republican because, to the point of the affirming side, the pro-life issue. The Democratic Party has made very clear that pro-life Democrats are not welcome within their party. What was it, the Democratic National Convention? They openly stated that all the pro-life Democrats to leave. Was that there? Where was that? Okay, I can't remember where it was, but that did happen. Look it up. Pro-life Democrats are not welcome within their own party. The Republican Party, as a party, is pro-life. Now, whether they fulfill that properly or not is a completely different question. Merely on their platform, they are a good. Merely on Trump's platform alone, it is a good. On the Democratic side, the platform is evil. On that particular issue, which is the preeminent issue, not just of this election, but of Catholic American politics. Yes? Yes. That's honestly all I have to say. I'm assuming I'm taking questions. That's the right thing?
Is that it? Yes.
Okay, sweet. So questions, comments, concerns.
One
oh, what a man. What a man. So excited. Yes? Anyone?
Yes, ma'am. Get her on my phone,
So you were just saying about, just on the platform of the Republican Party, that what they say is a good, but if something has been shown to be corrupt in what it does, which both parties have been, then are we required to vote for something that in itself is not a good but says it's a good?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, and I'm not saying that you're required to, so I'm, contrary to popular opinion, I'm not disagreeing completely with the affirmation of the motion. What I'm just saying is that the argument of the lesser of two evils that Mr. Orsay brought up is completely invalid. Now, in that particular scenario, you have the option between a proposed good, which is done very poorly, or a proposed evil that is done very well. That's the option that you have there. So in that case, a poorly done good is much better than a very well done evil. So I will definitely choose that option, just saying. All right, just one question or more questions?
That is all.
That is it, okay,
That is all.
Sweet, who do I give this to?
Thank you. We're looking for another question, another speech. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Hear, hear.
Okay. So, Hitler versus Stalin. How depraved does a country have to be to have those two as the options? Like, at that point, you're beyond voting. You have to get your tanks and your guns and fight a revolution. Are we at that point as a country where Trump is comparable to Hitler and Biden to Stalin? I don't think so. I think the pro-life issue is a hill worth dying on. It's something that you can still have an effect, right? It matters who gets into office. Trump has done a lot of good. 2 Supreme Court justices, one on the way, all the lesser courts, and as I believe someone on the opposing motion said, it's in the judicial branch, and he has filled the judicial branch with lots of constitutionalists who, are pro-life. So that is a good, that's a veritable good, and therefore, I think Trump is the way, because it matters if he wins. If Biden wins, as has been stated, Roe v. Wade will be codified. That sucks. There's no way around that. And to vote third party is kind of a cop-out when there is genuine good. And that's about it.
Yes, one question, please.
Must.
Please sit, both of you. Yes, sir, in the back.
I just had a quick question. One of the cruxes of your argument seemed to filter around the idea of essentially the good, focusing on the good that can come out of voting for Trump. We have been mainly focused on the pro-life issue. Focusing on the good element of that, what about the bad that comes with it, i.e. the children in cages or the 200,000 Americans dead due to his policies and reactions?
Well, I think it's kind of what the opposing motion said, that, well, we have to speak out from the inside and change that. But we can't compromise on abortion either.
All right, and another speech, please. Mr. Dan Somey.
Here, here.
Okay, so we have to work within the system, right? We have to work within our democracy, yeah?
Hold it a little closer to your mouth, please.
That's great, because we don't live in a democracy, actually. In fact, we live in a constitutional republic, and in this time, we are moving increasingly towards a democratic system, which Aristotle said is a step away from tyranny. So, must we vote? Ought we vote? Really? When the founders framed the Constitution, they did not mention democracy once. In fact, what they did was set up a system of representative government in which direct elections by the people only went to the House of Representatives, which really didn't have that much power and was countered by the presidency and the Senate. Now, what I am proposing is instantly repealing the 14th Amendment, removing democracy from the Senate, and increasing the power of the Electoral College to take choices like this away from the people.
Please relate your argument to the motion, sir. Please relate your argument to the motion.
Okay, so I'm talking about voting in particular. We shouldn't vote. Voting is terrible. When power corrupts absolutely, we hear that. And when we increase power of the people, people will be corrupted. Now, granted that we live in an imperfect world, that point aside, we heard tonight a second part, that a third-party candidate has never won. Was Lincoln not the first Republican who ran as a third party? Did not what he do change the fabric of America in such a way that we can all be really thankful for? My point there being said is, and people have touched on this, when you create a pocket outside of the two-party system, the two-party system fights for the vote of that pocket. It's called a voting bloc. So what I am encouraging is you not to think of in purely, if we have to think in these purely democratic ways and, usher in the tyranny of the majority, we take a step back and we create a counterweight to that by creating a voting bloc that acts outside of this democratic structure. So yeah, 2020 vision, vote for Kanye.
One question, please. Oh, okay, yes, you, sir. Yeah, in the brown sweater.
Technically, it's orange. So my question for you is, you said this was founded as a constitutional republic, but wasn't it founded as a democratic republic? And if it was, then don't we have a duty to fulfill our obligation to vote?
No, it's a representative constitutional republic. Democracy is nowhere in the founding, there was never democratic. In fact, they railed against the notion of democracy for the same reasons we see today. We are all arguing about this because it matters to us. I have a minute, right?
Please conclude.
You don't have a minute?
No, you don't have a vote.
Boom. If there are any women who would like to make a speech, yes, ma'am, please. This is the last open floor speech.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Sarah Lynn. I'm originally from Oregon. And if y'all didn't know, Oregon is I'm not entirely sure whether this is correct, it is one of the least Catholic states in the entire United States. So that's where I'm from. And I know this is sort of anecdotal, but I know the Democratic position on abortion pretty well because my state is very pro-abortion, very pro-choice. And actually, I was the vice president of my pro-life club at a community college I went to before here. And so I want to talk specifically about the pro-life position and how that relates to our statement today. Specifically, two things. One is that I was undecided at the beginning of today. So I'm not necessarily for either side, but I wanted to point out a couple things. One of which is the Biden-Harris campaign's view on abortion. It is undeniable that they are very, very, very pro-choice. Biden, who knows what he thinks. But Harris is 100% pro-choice. She wants to make all abortions tax-paid. That is identifiably true. She wants to make all abortions tax-paid, leaving Christians who do not support abortion having to pay for abortions. She also wants to repeal President Trump's efforts for pro-life movements. And so this is a couple things that we know specifically about the Democratic candidates right now of what they believe and what they want to enforce. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the must, right? The must, we already heard about the must from Mr. Orsay. The must of like, what if your conscience is against it? What if you think that it's evil? And this is sort of towards your side, Mr. Orsay. However, this is what I'll just say. There's an exception in the pro-life movement of intent, meaning that like, if a woman's life is in danger, like seriously in danger, like if she has a cancerous uterus, it is not morally wrong for her to have an abortion. That is part of the Catholic Church, it's part of their position. If a woman has a cancerous uterus or something of that effect, it is not morally wrong for her to have an abortion. I'm not saying she should, it's definitely not saying she should, and it's very admirable for her not to, but it is not morally wrong to do so. It's about intent. So if someone was to vote for the Democrat Party, it would not be morally wrong to do so if their intent is not to vote to support the pro-choice movement. However, in actuality, what would you be doing? You would be supporting that. So it depends on what your top issue is. And in reference to the other pro-life issues, such as like the immigrants and all of that, they have the right to life, at least. They have the right to be born and to live. And I think that should be our first issue, at least it is for me, because what's happening right now in our country is awful, and it's leaving people in terrible states. Women, children, families, we all know this, and we've all seen the impact of abortion. And so that's what I would say should be your top issue. Yeah, and that's all I had to say.
Do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am, in the gray. Ah.
What did she say?
Okay. She said she lost her train of thought.
Oh, okay.
In the orange sweater, then. Definitely not brown.
So my question is, so you said it's fine for a woman to have an abortion with a cancerous uterus.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that it's okay for to kill somebody to save your own life? So just for example, like if you're getting chased by a bear.
In the form of a question, please.
What?
In the form of a question.
I was getting there. So if you're running from a bear with a buddy, is it okay to push your buddy down? I was using an anecdote.
Yeah, so I don't think I would really compare that to that example. But basically, the position that I'm trying to make clear is that the intent of having an abortion in such a case, or removing the uterus in that case, is not to kill the child, it is to save the life. So it's about the intent, it's not really about the action necessarily. Yeah, so that can't really be used for an excuse for abortion, except for those very specific cases where it's not the intent to kill the child, it's the intent to save a life. So it matters the intent.
Thank you very much. We are now going to enter into the lightning round of 2-minute speeches. We are first going to have a speech from each side of lightning round, responding to the thoughts that we've had so far. I would encourage you, particularly now that we are into the 2-minute speeches where the time is a little bit shorter, that you would give them a little bit of time to speak before you immediately begin hissing. We've had a lot, I'm really glad that we are all participating, but let's allow them to actually speak without having to shout over a den of snakes. From the affirming side.
So I want you guys to look at me real quick. I am a small Mexican woman, which is two things that are held against me theoretically for what people believe that Trump is against. But however, I just want to talk about the immigration issue first. So for the people, I totally agree that it is a big issue right now. However, the reason that it is a big issue was because of the Obama administration. Under Obama, with Joe Biden as vice president, they actually increased deportations 3,600%. And you guys can look that up if you guys don't believe me. So actually, they had the highest rate of deportations, not President Trump. And also, if you guys were wondering about other issues, I actually have pages of Trump's accomplishments over there that you can come find me later after the debate, and I would be happy to walk it through with you. And also, one of the things I wanted to touch on was also unemployment. So with Trump, we've had the lowest unemployment rate.
1 minute.
That we've had in many, many years. And the reason I bring that up is because work is an essential part of our lives. It gives us purpose, and it helps us build virtue. So theoretically, with that, Trump is assisting us in that. And also, I just wanted to go back to the must that we keep coming back to. And Catholic social teaching only helps guide us. It is not going to tell you, you have to vote for this candidate or this candidate. So that is the reason why you have that personal responsibility to decide for yourselves. So make the right choice, my friends.
And now we are going to hear from the opposing side.
Thank you very much. So we learned a couple of things tonight. The first is that Mr. Kerry looks absolutely dashing in that suit. My goodness, where did you get that tailored? However, in the second place, there was one key thing that I took out of this. Understand, my partner and I are not necessarily, because we have completely ambiguous political positions, going against President Trump. We are opposing the motion, which is must, which the other team seems to be conveniently forgetting for the sake of plugging away for the 2020 President Trump presidential campaign platform. So thank you very much for that. His accomplishments don't matter. It doesn't, because the word is must. And again, if you believe, and there are good reasons, Mr. Kerr, I'm about to get on that, why one would believe that Trump is evil, you cannot vote for him. You cannot vote for a candidate that you believe to be evil. So another thing we figured out tonight, Mr. Kerr is cool with drone striking children, throwing children into cages on the border. Doesn't matter that the Obama administration did it first. It's terrible either way, and if you disagree with that, you're a utilitarian and not a very good Catholic.
1 minute.
1 minute. Really, what more is there to say? Again, if you're going to vote for President Trump, vote for President Trump. Vote with your conscience. You cannot vote against your conscience, and you cannot vote for the lesser of two evils. Vote for the candidate that you need to be good, not because you believe the other candidate to be evil. Is that so hard to do? By the way, on the, where you at? I'm looking for you. Soviet Union, Hitler versus Stalin. There you are. Thank you very much for your point. You said, have we really come to United States of America being comparable to Hitler and Stalin? Well, no, not quite, but that was a purposeful equivalency, as I pointed out. So to answer your question,
15
no,
seconds, third person only.
But we're on our way to that if this kind of thing continues. So there's your answer. It's not a false equivalency. Thank you, that's all. Must.
Yes, Mr. Denley.
Thank you. I find it, we focus on must. I have to say I'm quite a Trump supporter, but I am opposing the motion. And let's take faithful Catholics. The fact that we have to distinguish between faithful, we're the faithful ones here, and like all the rest of the other half of the Catholics who are in good standing with the church are the unfaithful ones who are voting for the Democrats. I think it really shows, and that Biden is a self-proclaimed Catholic, a really difficult state we're in the church at this point in time. That we're the faithful ones, we vote for Trump, we vote pro-life, they're the bad ones. Let's go back to the third-party vote. Okay, Kanye, who said he was going to get in, he made quite a splash. He had his abortion rant where he said, I almost aborted my child, and many people saw that. If we as Catholics didn't just play the predetermined game of left and right and said, we're going to start having a candidate who's going to really respect Catholic values, who, like the gentleman said earlier about the pro-life march, the March for Life, like instead of just saying, oh, rah, rah, we got a judge, we sit in front of the court and don't leave for weeks. Why don't we have a candidate, a third-party candidate, who's promoting that radicality of the gospel, and as Catholics rally around a person like that, rather than rally around the established, predetermined game of the Republican Party? We are so married to, whether it's Democrat or Republican, we lose ourselves in like who we are as Catholics. So I would urge you to oppose the motion to that faithful Catholics, let's take it, they're not being, you are in good standing with the church whether you vote Democrat or Republican. So this is, faithful Catholics can vote for both according to the norms of the church and the hierarchs. That isn't a debate. We're arguing that those people who have a moral conscience guided by this should vote. So I urge you to oppose the motion and to encourage a true radicality of the gospel by voting third party and not just playing the games of the Republican Party.
Yes, you, ma'am.
Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm going to have a little something to say about third parties. So, someone earlier brought up the Republican Party. For those of you who are not history majors like I am, the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. The reason that this third party worked was because it was a coalition of conscious Whigs who are anti-slavery, Free Soil Democrats who are anti-slavery, the Free Soil Party who are anti-slavery, and dozens of other little anti-slavery parties who all came together in a coalition to advance this one issue. That's how the third party won. They had a good showing in 1856, and then in 1860 they won the presidency. But I do not think that you can take that example and apply it to this election. Because there are a couple of things going on. Number one, you have a coalition forming years before this presidential election that eventually 6 years down the road managed to do something great. We don't have that right now. We have a month before the election.
1 minute.
There is no time to have a viable third party. Second of all, the Republican Party won because the Democratic Party split into North and South over slavery. So the Republican issue is a very specific to the circumstances that were at the time. So that's the third party thing. Is it possible? Yes, but we're going to have the right circumstances and start planning years in advance, AKA now. Can I just say one thing about the virtue of prudence? It is a virtue. We're working in the system that we have now. We're not working under the system that we had in 1854, 1856, and 1860. Therefore, even if we start doing that pro-life coalition now, which I do think is possible, because most Americans do, in some...
15 seconds.
Do support the pro-life movement in some way. We have to start that now. So for right now, the third-party vote just isn't practical.
Thank you. Mr. Cirillo, please.
All right, so I'm just real quick going to give you a 2-minute history lesson. So the reason why the British colonies left Britain was because of unjust taxation. And from my understanding, a large thing that went into the writing of the Constitution was the proper relationship between the government and the citizens, right? So that lovely lady who just gave a speech said she was a history major. Well, okay, so Italy and Russia in the mid-1800s, there arose certain organizations, the names of which I'm forgetting, but they were young socialist intellectuals who firmly believed in the efficacy of terrorism, right? Exactly, right. So what happened? You see them committing horrible acts of terrorism, and you see political figures actually condoning and supporting them, right? And this is actually kind of analogous to what we have going on now. We have Black Lives Matter and Antifa, who are explicitly communist organizations who are doing very similar things. So we're in a pretty dangerous situation
1
compared
minute.
to them. Exactly. Okay, so with that in mind, we have to think about the state of our country now. So in terms of taxes, I mean, the CARES Act that Trump enacted took trillions of dollars and poured it into the public and private sector, which is, by the way, a characteristic of fascism, which is controlling the economy. But besides that, right, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, right, they all say that the purpose of the state is to assist citizens in living the good life, right? And I think that's something else that the Founding Fathers had in mind while they were writing the Constitution. And so I think the civic duty that lies on
15
our
seconds.
shoulders is not necessarily to vote for Trump. So I stand against the House. I think what we must do is reform, right? And people are arguing about democracy. When it really comes down to it, I mean, big tech
Please conclude.
celebrities have so much influence over the government, right? So any large voice with influence can influence the government. And therefore, I conclude that we as Catholics, a very strong voice in America.
Thank you, sir.
Must reform the country. Okay.
All right, our next lightning round speech, please. Yes, Ms. Connor.
I just have one quick statement to make, which is that I would like to go back to the opening arguments of Mr. Wolf and Mr. Orsay over here. In Mr. Wolf's opening argument, he proceeded to say that we should vote for what we feel is the better good. I'd like to emphasize the word feel. That is moral relativism. Mr. Orsay then proceeded to stand up and state that there is a better good and that there is a better evil, therefore directly contradicting his partner. So I would just like to say that we need to watch for the consistency within the arguments of each side. Thank you.
Mr. Schmeezing, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I actually am going to speak against both the affirming and opposing sides. First, against the affirming side, I did find that in your opening speeches you did play down the word must. As the opposing side pointed out, that is the crux of this debate. So I would be interested to see in the closing speeches, because must I would take as an obligatory imperative You must vote for Trump. So I would like to have that clarified. Against the opposing side, Mr. Orsay has repeatedly brought up the role of conscience in voting. He, again, applied that word towards must. I'm going to apply that word towards faithful Catholic. I think that a very, very good argument can be made that Trump is not evil, that Trump is in fact good. There's a difference between personal life and public life. We are all sinners, Trump among us. The fact that we sin doesn't disqualify him. And so that's where party platform definitely comes into play. In terms of the party platform, Trump is a good, not even just not an evil. Trump is good, Biden is bad. Because of that, that negates third-party options. It's not a choice between two evils. You have a good. You have a good that's a possible good. You have to vote for that possible good.
45 seconds.
All right, very good. And so on the conscience issue then, if you say, if they're arguing that you have to vote with your conscience, I would say that's a malformed conscience. And if your conscience is malformed to that degree, you are not a faithful Catholic, and therefore fall outside of the motion. So that would be my primary criticism of the opposing side. Thank you very much.
We will. Yes, you, sir.
Hello, my name is Ryan Nelson, and I'm an American First Paleocon, which is different from the traditional Republican Party neoconservative stance. And that's important because I'm going to be talking about immigration and why you should vote for Donald Trump based upon his immigration policy, which largely cuts down on it. Right, first off is the problem of the children at the border, where they're being separated from their parents and being placed in so-called cages. First off, that's a good thing. If you have a 45-year-old man coming across with a 14-year-old girl who he claims is her daughter and they have no papers, I am not going to stick those two in a jail cell together. Second off, cutting down on immigration leads to higher wages for American workers. This has been proved in a couple studies. There's one by, I believe, the Center for Immigration Control. You have a large amount of Americans who are looking for work, and these jobs will be taken by American workers. And there's only 6 professions that are largely immigrants, and of those, only 54% are immigrants, meaning that those jobs will be taken by American workers. Okay, this is the principle of job scarcity. Trump being not totally anti-immigrant, but cutting down on immigration, illegal and legal, is a good thing, and it protects this nation's cultural identity, no matter what race you are, and it protects American workers. You should vote for Trump because of that. Now, whether or not you must vote for Trump is a totally different issue, and I'm getting closer and closer to abstaining because of that, because one side is arguing whether or not Trump should be made emperor, which he should, and the other is arguing about the definition of the word should. So I think there's a very clear distinction of the arguments.
15 seconds.
Thank you very much, and have a nice night.
Yes, Mr. Spieldenner.
Thank you. So throughout the night, the word that they've been all focusing on is the word must. But I honestly feel that the word that is just as important is the faithful part. Now, the most important part right now for our purposes of a faithful Catholic is on the stance of abortion. If you are a faithful Catholic, you are pro-life. There's no way around it. If you disagree with that, take that up with the Catholic Church. Now, if you are pro-life, again, and if you are a faithful Catholic, you are going to act on those beliefs. Otherwise, you don't actually believe them. And if you act on those beliefs, you're going to act in a way that you think is actually going to do something. We don't stand outside of abortion clinics expecting that nothing is going to come out of it. And with that, we have to assess our vote in a similar manner, primarily with the third-party vote. While it is maybe for your conscience a better option, you ultimately are not going to be moving the pro-life issue forward in any regard. And while the Donald Trump administration may not be the most pro-life administration of all time, you can argue that elsewhere, it may be only 2 steps forward, but as opposed to the Biden administration, you can almost guarantee that'll be 10 steps back. And we have to take those votes into consideration as to the effect of that vote. And if you are a faithful Catholic, meaning you are a pro-life Catholic, meaning that you are acting on that belief, you have to act and you must vote for the pro-life candidate despite of His Holiness, because we're not voting for a saint right now. We're
15
voting for a
seconds.
president and his policies, and a faithful Catholic will vote in line with those beliefs. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I didn't actually think I was going to get picked, so here we go. All right, so one of my biggest issues on this is that when I'm looking at the must I vote for President Trump or must I not? I view it from the perspective of when you're comparing President Trump to Joe Biden, when you see their different stances, President Trump tries to protect our natural rights that have been given to us by our Constitution, by our Bill of Rights. Joe Biden, on the other hand, is infringing on those rights. If we don't vote for President Trump, those rights will be taken away. If we have those rights taken away, we can't make any changes for pro-life. We can't do anything to make a third party. That right will be stripped away. So if we want to make the third party, we have to vote for President Trump, because here's our first step into creating that third party, okay? If we have that right taken away, we have no option then to create a pro-life third party that will hopefully become a primary party. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name's Nick Boyko, and today I will be talking about how people often claim that President Trump isn't pro-life, when in fact, much of what people say he should do is limited to the powers enumerated to the Congress in Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. The President only has the authority to, in actuality, exercise and put into action that what the Congress writes up. And at least from my research, President Trump has done about as much as he can constitutionally by himself. With 3 appointments, or almost 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, he repealed the Mexico City policy, which is the one that funded foreign abortions. And he upheld the Hyde Amendment, which forbid Medicare funding for abortion. Now, of those things, he really can't do much more unless Congress actually writes a bill and puts it in front of him.
1 minute.
And I remember in 2018, the House of Representatives was voting on a 20-week abortion bill. The reason it failed is because 3 Republicans defected and decided not to vote for it. If there had been 3 more Republicans who were actually pro-life in the House at that time, it would have passed the House and presumably the Senate. And I can almost guarantee you, based on what he said, that if that bill hit his desk, he would have signed it. Unfortunately, though, because there are Republicans who do not support the right to life, unfortunately, that did fail. And instead, what we must do is we should vote for Republicans who do support that right. And if there are third parties that can get elected in certain parts of the country, for them, it doesn't really matter as long as they support that right.
15 seconds.
And we'll get that bill in front of the president. But to wrap up, my point here is President Trump has done about as much as he can do with his constitutionally given authority.
Yes, Ms. Roach.
So I'm going to be speaking against President Trump and why we must not vote for him on a pro-life standard. So there's a claim that Trump is pro-life. And to be pro-life, as a Catholic, we claim that we support life from birth to natural death. And Trump supports the death penalty by lethal injection. And if you're considering yourself pro-life, to me, lethal injection is not natural death. And in that sense, I think that Trump is not as pro-life as we make him out to be. And people speak on that from like a numerical point, and I understand like moral gravity and all of those terms, yet Jesus left the 99 to pursue the one.
1 minute.
And in that sense, Trump is not the God that we all make him out to be. And I think that a lot of us in our voting let our conservatism get in the way of our Catholicism, and that's what I want to leave you with.
Yes, you, sir. Yes.
Intrinsic evil versus prudential judgment. That's what we're talking about here. The teachings of the Catholic Church are that abortion is an intrinsic evil. It can never be supported, and the bishops of the United States have agreed that it is the preeminent issue. All of the other social issues are ones where Catholics can reasonably disagree because they fall into the category of prudential judgment. That we must keep that in mind. And with regard to the question of capital punishment, we're talking about the historical teachings through St. John Paul II, and Pope Francis does not have the ability to reverse that. Sorry. Also, there's a question of the murder of innocent individuals, emphasized even in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Look up Catechism 2240
1 minute.
regarding the question of voting. And it says that as Catholics and citizens, we have a moral obligation to vote. On January 20th, 2021, either Donald Trump or Joseph Biden, if he lives that long, will be inaugurated as the next president of the United States.
Mr. Lapis.
Thank you. I've been very much looking forward to this debate. I'm very happy that it is happening. I think this is an extremely important issue for Catholics, as political involvement is an extremely defining part of what we do to positively contribute to society. Right now, Catholics are completely overlooked by both political parties. No one takes us seriously. No one at all. And you know why that is? Because of the existence of what I call the idealistic Catholic. This is a person who says such things like Catholicism is getting in the way, or conservatism is getting in the way of Catholicism. Catholicism is conservatism. Catholicism is one of the oldest, longest standing religions right now that is prevalent globally. The Catholic Church makes very clear that there are certain things that are intrinsically evil. Abortion is one of those
1 minute.
things. You cannot let a wolf in sheep's clothing go up there in front of our country and say, I'm a Catholic, and then go and support abortion. The reason that this is able to happen is because of the existence of an idealistic Catholic. The person that says, oh, third party, I took a theology class, I'm super smart, I'm gonna go for a third party, you know, because I know what's better than, I know, I have this idealistic sense of what should and should not be. No, you don't. The world's imperfect. We have to make choices. You can't try and live in this idealistic world. So my point here is I would really encourage everyone to go ahead and really
15
look
seconds.
at the, how much time?
Seconds.
I don't know what that
15.
means.
10
Okay,
seconds.
I'm just going to keep going. I would really encourage everyone to really look at the issues. Do you want a wolf in sheep's clothing up there saying in front of everyone,
Please
I'm a
conclude.
Catholic? He is representing all of you. He's representing all of you. Think about that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's really important for all of us to remember that we should be separating the person from their political agendas, like separating Donald Trump from the Republican Party and their views, and separating Joe Biden from the Democratic Party and their views. Because I don't know about you, but I have, back home, I'm from around a city, and I have a lot of Democratic friends who have come up to me and told me that I should not be voting for Trump because he's a bad person. But Joe Biden is also a very horrible person at the same time. So really, we should be separating what their most important policies are. And one of the most important policies to President Trump is pro-life, the pro-life movement. And as Catholics, we should be voting for the pro-life movement. So therefore, we should be voting for President Trump. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are now going to have our final 2 lightning round speeches, and then we're going to move to concluding speeches. Ms. Cirilla.
I promised my brother I would do this, so. Lil Cyril up in here, just spitting some straight facts. So Mr. Orsay, at the beginning of the debate, I said, Mr. Orsay, if you don't choose between 2 evils, what do you do? And he said, oh, it's just 2 cars going off a cliff. We're already off the cliff. One's on fire, one's not. I want to say the cars are not off the cliff yet. If they were, we would be collecting our guns and tanks. But I know which car I want to be in to try to apply the brakes. So that's my first point. My second point is I opened Instagram today, and what did I see? I opened Facebook. Well, actually, I didn't open Facebook, but in the past, I've opened Facebook. You open my running app, out of all things, and what do you see? You see mail-in ballots. Do your mail-in ballots, which is, I want to say, it's actually a very strong push from the Biden administration. I think it's hard to argue that, and it's really not particularly a reliable way to get your vote in. There's an extremely strong push from the Biden administration in their whole thing that's saying, oh, you got to vote. Why? Because America is a world power, and it really has a lot of influence over different countries and what's going on inside of it. So your vote does matter. Don't vote third party. It's not going to go through. Another thing is, really what you're voting for is you got this guy, and he's kind of neutral. And then you got this guy, and he's a communist, and he's trying to take away our guns. And come on, man, as Sleepy Joe would say, Trump 2020.
Point of order. May the motion be read again in its entirety.
We will do that before the voting.
Thank you.
Mr. McHugh.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? My name is Connor McHugh, and I am a biochem student here at Franciscan. And I would like to just talk about the prompt itself. I think we're all getting this wrong, in a way. We look at the actual prompt says must. And I might be beating a dead horse, yes. But let's look into the word must. When a police officer comes up to you and asks, you must provide your license and registration, he is not asking you to, oh, maybe I don't feel like it, or maybe another day, sir, I was having too much to drink tonight, I'll pass. That's not the point. The point is you must and you will provide, or hands-on actions will be occurred. Now, when we look at actually voting, when you apply that must to anyone with voting, you're taking away their rights, their freedom to vote. Applying that must says you do not have a right. We are saying this is what you are going to do.
1 minute.
Thank you. And this is what you will do. And that's a problem. So I personally oppose the motion based on that word must. Now, if you write in other people or you vote a third party, is that efficient in trying to get pro-life or all these other Catholicism legislation into the government? No, it's not. It's not efficient at all. But if we look at the prompt, and that's what tonight's about, must you vote for Donald Trump? I would say no, you do not. You're not obliged to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is going to conclude our lightning round speeches. We will now hear 1 3-minute concluding speech from each side, beginning with the affirming side.
Thank you, Mr. Denley. This is the night that will break our army or else preserve it. We've all taken Epic and the Person. That's from the Iliad. Yes, I read it too many times. This is a debate that's more about voting for Donald Trump. It's more than a debate about abortion. It's more than a debate about third parties. It's more than a debate about a four-letter word called must. This is a debate about where we as Catholics are standing in the most preeminent country in the world, in the strongest country in the world, in an election in 2020 that will potentially decide, actually will decide, partially the fate of the United States in this century. This is not something that we can take lightly. Now, as a simple plug, you all should have already registered to vote and have your absentee ballots. But that besides, let's take a look at the main issues here. We're going to talk about must, we're going to talk about conscience, and we're going to talk about third parties. First of all, let's talk about must. That ties in very well with conscience. If you have a conscience with which you do, if you have a conscience that you must obey, which you do, if you have a conscience which must be formed according to Catholic principles, which you do, and if you believe that the Catholic Church is correct, that abortion is the preeminent issue, and that from it all other social issues flow, then you have no other identity, no other choice in this election but to vote for Donald Trump. That is the only decision you can make based off of that reasoning. The only decision. But let's talk about third parties for a second. I would like to completely commend Ms. Forstoffel for her point and accurate history lesson, which I neglected in my first speech, nor had the history to back up. Third parties take time. If today is going to be the day that we as Americans band together, we as Catholics band together, and decide that we disagree with some of the things that the Republican Party has, that we don't like that people, when they come in illegally, are thrown in cages.
1 minute.
Then we need to act now. And that action is not in supporting a third party, which will not win, no matter if all of us in this room vote and all of us in our families vote for them, but in action to changing the Republican Party to reflect our issues. We are the Catholics in America. We have a voice, and until today, I have questioned whether or not that voice is really going to mean something. Are we going to stand together in supporting truth, in supporting anti-abortion measures, in ultimately supporting God's law? If that is the case, then we have no other decision today but to make to vote for Donald Trump on November 3rd. Thank you very much.
And finally, a concluding speech from the opposing side.
Thank you. You know, I recall a time, it was one of the most intense Veritas debates I've went to, and it was on the Trump immigration border policy. And a gentleman in a Make America Great Again hat and a Donald Trump tank top, which was quite tasteful, by the way, stood up and said, and I quote, "If immigrants represent Catholic culture, then I don't want a Catholic culture in my country, I want American culture." That's what he said. So that's a pretty clear statement, at least to me, that, well, not just to me, it's just true, that if you're at Franciscan University and you prioritize conservatism over being a Catholic, you are Judas Iscariot. Well done. You are. There's no and, if, buts, or maybes around that. You are a Catholic first. I'm going to reread the statement for you because a lot of people seem to think this is a pro-life debate. A lot of people seem to think this is about the Democratic Party. A lot of people seem to think this is about Joe Biden. The statement actually reads, "This House believes that faithful," thank you, Mr. McKenna, "Catholics must," thank you, me, "vote for Trump in the upcoming election." Nowhere in that statement is Joe Biden. Nowhere in that statement is Democrats. Also, to your point, sir, Catholics are not morally obligated to vote. Again, Hitler versus Stalin example. You are not obligated to vote when there are two bad candidates. To the malformed conscience point, Mr. McKenna, you know people, reasonable, good, faithful Catholics who believe Donald Trump to be evil. You and I know them, both of us. You know exactly who I'm talking about right now. And you know those people to be good people. You know them to be good Catholics with well-formed moral consciences. And
Third
you
person
throw
only.
them under the bus. No. The statement is faithful Catholics must vote for Trump in the upcoming election. Let me lay this out for you very clearly. In Veritas debates, you're supposed to, you're not going to, but you are supposed to vote for the side that has the better argument. I have no doubt that is in most Veritas debates. People will not do that. I would encourage you to, however, in the Franciscan style. But more important than that, if there is any group of people that may not vote for Trump for any
1 minute.
legitimate reason, this motion may not pass. That is how it works, plain and simple. That is what must means, and that's why I keep saying the word must tonight. If there is a single group of Catholics that can reasonably object to Donald Trump being president, we've brought up good points why, separate from Biden, separate from anything else, then this motion may not pass. It is that simple. Thank you very much and have a wonderful night.
All right, that is going to conclude the arguments for our debate. We're now going to hear a short talk about Veritas and about the various things that we're doing. We will then read the motion. We will read the motion. We will commence a vote. We will give the initial vote, and then finally who won.
The Hiss is telling me I should be brief. I just want to let you know 2 weeks from now we are having another debate. This one's going to be a charity debate, motion to be decided. We did a charity debate once before on dating at Franciscan. So be assured it will be as controversial or maybe close to that. Also, if you'd like to be more involved with Veritas, we have a group called the Associates. We have certain socials and certain events. So if you'd like to learn more about that, we have a table in the back. Likewise, if you have the little blue sheet here, this is a initiative, the Totus Tuus Library Room, where we're trying to beautify campus, really leave a lasting impression on campus, something that we can really be proud of in a physical legacy. And if you look at this particular room, could use a lot of updating, and hoping to make that a room where you can hold meetings, different events. So if you want to learn more about this, there's a GoFundMe link on there. If you'd like to be more direct, they also take Venmo at Totus Tuus Room. And I think with that, we'll move to the vote.
Okay, so the motion, as has been spoken about ad nauseum, this House believes that faithful Catholics must vote for Trump in the upcoming election. Will all of those who affirm the motion please stand? Thank you very much. You may be seated. Will all of those who oppose the motion please rise now? Shh. All right, you may be seated. And now our much talked about third-party voters, abstainers. Will they please stand now? All right. Okay, so at the very beginning of the debate, we did a vote, and at that time, we had 80 votes affirming the motion, 35 opposing the motion, and 46 abstaining, or undecided. Now, after all has been said, we have 170 affirming, 40 opposing, and 10 abstaining. So by that vote, the motion passes. And we are now going to close in prayer, and that will be all. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. That will be all.